The airport was full of noise. People rushed around with bags, children cried, and announcements filled the air. But one man stood calmly near gate 12. His name was Zane. No one knew much about him. He wore simple clothes, carried one small black backpack, and didn't talk to anyone. His eyes were sharp but quiet. He looked like someone who didn't like attention. Zane handed his boarding pass to the flight attendant without a word. She smiled politely and pointed to the jet bridge. "Enjoy your flight, sir." He nodded once, then walked in. Inside the plane, he moved silently to his seat -14A, by the window. He sat down, placed his backpack under the seat, and pulled out a small old book. It had no title on the cover, just a black leather cover and folded pages. He began to read. Other passengers came in, loud and busy. Families, business travelers, tourists. Some were talking on the phone. Others were fighting over luggage space. But Zane didn't move. He just kept reading. A flight attendant offered him water. He said, "Thank you," in a calm voice and took the glass with steady hands. Then he returned to his book. The plane door closed. The captain spoke from the front. "Good evening, passengers. This is flight 782, non-stop to New York City. Flight time will be 8 hours. Please fasten your seatbelts and enjoy the journey." Everyone settled in. The engine started. Then it happened. Just seconds before the plane was about to taxi, the door opened again. 2 uniformed security officers walked in, fast and serious. They didn't speak to anyone. They went straight to row 14. The man in seat 14A looked up. "Sir," one of the officers said, "you need to come with us." Zane closed his book slowly. "Why?" he asked. "You've been flagged. We need to take you in for questioning." The whole cabin went silent. People turned their heads, whispering. Some began recording on their phones. Zane didn't argue. He didn't shout. He didn't even look surprised. He simply stood up, picked up his backpack, and walked between the 2 officers down the aisle. As they reached the plane door, a little girl asked, "Mommy, did he do something bad?" The mother didn't answer. Zane looked back one last time, at the people at his empty seat. Then he was gone. The door closed again. The captain apologized over the speaker. "Sorry for the delay. We'll be taking off shortly." The plane lifted into the sky. But no one stopped talking about the man in seat 14A. Meanwhile, deep inside the airport security room, Zane sat in a cold chair. A bright light shone on his face. The 2 officers stood in front of him, watching closely. "We know who you are," one of them said. "Don't act innocent." "I've already told you," Zane replied quietly. "You have the wrong man. No passport, no social media, no work history, no fingerprint match, and yet you fly first class?" The other officer said with suspicion. "I like to travel in silence," Zane said, calm as ever. "Where were you before this flight?" "Nowhere important." The officer slammed a folder on the table. "You're connected to a major cybercrime ring. $4 billion missing across multiple countries. You were seen near one of the servers last month. Explain that." Zane looked at the folder, then back at the man. "That wasn't me," he said, "but I know who it was." The officers paused. "What do you mean?" one of them asked. Zane smiled for the first time, but it wasn't a happy smile. "You'll find out," he said. The officers looked at each other. Then one leaned closer. "Where were you going? Who are you meeting in New York?" Zane looked directly at him. "Do you think the real thief would fly commercial and sit in seat 14A?" he asked softly. Before the officers could respond, an alert came on their computer. "Security warning. Multiple system failures. Banki networksbreched. They stared at the screen. Another alert popped up. UAUTHORISEDACCS to Federal ACCI. So your C Luhan Kane on. Zane looked at the screen too, and smiled again. "You dragged the wrong man," he said quietly. The interrogation room was cold, and Zane's calm presence seemed out of place. The two security officers, now joined by a government agent, stood around him, their eyes filled with suspicion. They had just received the second alert, another breach. This time, the system logs showed access to a secure government server. Whoever was behind it had used a highly advanced method to bypass all security measures. It was as if the hacker knew every weakness, every backdoor in the system, and now they were certain it was Zane. The agent in the room, a tall man with sharp eyes, stepped forward. He slid a folder across the table toward Zane. "Here's the deal," the agent said, his voice low. "You're not going anywhere until we get some answers. You don't have a passport, no ID, no history. You've disappeared from every record. No criminal past, no employment, no connections. You're a ghost." Zane didn't flinch. His fingers rested on the table, unmoving. He didn't look at the folder. He didn't need to. "I've told you," Zane said quietly. "I am not the man you're looking for." The agent laughed coldly. "Oh, we know you're the one. We've traced your movements. We know you've been involved in some of the biggest data breaches in history. All that money, gone in seconds." Zane raised his eyes and met the agent's gaze. "You think I'm stealing it? Or am I taking it back?" The agent froze for a moment. He hadn't expected that response. Zane leaned back in his chair, his calm expression unchanged. "Whoever you think I am, I'm not. I have nothing to do with those billions, but I know who does." The officers exchanged looks. They didn't believe him, but there was a nagging feeling that Zane was telling the truth. They didn't know his past, and that made him dangerous. They couldn't understand why someone like him, a quiet, unassuming man, would have access to some of the most powerful networks in the world. "So, tell us who you are," the agent demanded, his voice harsher now. "You know about the hack. You know the money's been moved. Tell us what we need to know. Who are you working for?" Zane remained silent for a moment. He wasn't going to answer their questions directly, not yet. His eyes flickered toward the computer screen, where the logs of the latest breach were still displayed. His expression remained calm, but inside, he was already planning his next move. "You think this is about money," Zane said softly. "But it's not. It's about power." The room was silent. The agent looked confused. "Power? What are you talking about?" Zane's lips parted slightly, as if considering whether or not to continue. He could see the agent was starting to doubt his earlier assumptions. "It's all part of a bigger game," Zane said. "You've been chasing the wrong person. You think I'm stealing from you. But I'm not. I'm giving it back." The officers looked at each other, clearly confused. "Giving it back?" The agent repeated. "What does that even mean?" Zane stood up slowly, his eyes still locked on the agent. "I used to work for the government. I was one of their best engineers. I built the very systems you're trying to protect, and I watched them destroy people with those systems. I couldn't stand it anymore." He paused, as if the memory was painful. They knew how much power they had. They used it to control everything, everyone. The rich got richer, the poor stayed poor, and if anyone got in the way, they'd be erased. People like me, people who could see the truth, we were the ones who paid the price. The agent's expression softened, just for a moment. "So you're a whistleblower?" Zane shook his head slowly. "No, I'm not a whistleblower. I'm a messenger. I'm doing what should have been done a long time ago." The agents looked confused, unsure whether to believe him. "What are you talking about?" one of the officers asked. "I'm taking back what was stolen," Zane said, his voice quiet, but full of conviction. "The billions you've been chasing, it was never yours to begin with." He looked at the computer screen once more. "And you won't stop me. You're already too late." A long silence filled the room. The officers didn't know what to say. Zane had given them more than they expected, but none of it made sense. Before anyone could respond, Zane stood up. "I have to go," he said, his voice calm again. "But you still don't understand. If you want to stop the money, you need to follow the money." He turned toward the door. "Don't try to find me," he added over his shoulder. "You won't." The officers stared at him, still unsure what to do. But it was clear they were no closer to solving the mystery. They had dragged the wrong man off the plane. And now, They had no idea how to stop him. Zayn didn't look back as he walked out of the security room. The two officers and the agent stood still, frozen by the mystery that surrounded him. They had expected to break him, to force him into revealing his secrets. Instead, Zayn had given them more questions than answers. As he walked down the hall, Zayn's mind raced. He knew he didn't have much time. There were powerful people looking for him, and they would stop at nothing to silence him. But Zayn wasn't afraid. He had been planning this for years. What they didn't realize was that he had already won. Minutes later, Zayn was in the crowded airport terminal, blending into the crowd. People rushed past him, too busy to notice the man with no past, the man who had just pulled off a heist worth billions. Zayn took a deep breath. He wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. He checked his phone for the latest news. The breach had already made headlines. News agencies were reporting about the massive cyber attack that had hit several international banks and government servers. The stolen money had been transferred to secret accounts, and the authorities were scrambling to find the culprits. But Zayn wasn't worried about the money. He didn't need it. He had a bigger plan in motion. As he walked past a small cafe, he overheard a conversation that made his heart race. Two men in business suits were talking in hushed voices. They were speaking about the breach, and from the look on their faces, they seemed more concerned than the agents who had questioned him. One of the men was saying, "We need to find out who did this. Whoever they are, they have access to everything. We can't let them get away with it." The other man nodded. "We'll have to bring in someone else, someone who can get answers from this person." Zayn froze for a second. The words "bring in someone else" sent a chill down his spine. It was clear that these men knew far more than the officers back at the airport. They weren't just looking for a hacker. They were looking for someone who had the power to bring down entire systems. Zayn's plan had worked, but now the game was changing. These men were connected to a far-reaching network, one that controlled everything behind the scenes. Zayn pulled his jacket tighter around him and kept walking, trying not to draw attention to himself. But his mind was spinning with thoughts of what he had just overheard. Who were these men? What did they want with him? It didn't matter now. Zayn had already made his move, and there was no turning back. He had to find the truth before they found him. Back at the airport, the agents had begun to piece together the puzzle. They had received a report that the man who had been removed from the plane was involved in something much bigger than they could understand. The information on his stolen phone was encrypted, but they had managed to extract one thing: an address. The agent in charge, now more determined than ever, looked at the screen. "We've got an address," he muttered to himself. "He's been here before, and he's not working alone." The officer next to him raised an eyebrow. "You think he's connected to the breach?" The agent nodded. "It's more than that. He's the key to everything. If we find him, we find the rest of the network." But Zayn wasn't at the address they had found. In fact, Zayn had already anticipated this move. He had planted the address himself, a decoy to lead them in the wrong direction. He had done it countless times before, and it had always worked. The agents would waste precious time chasing shadows, while Zayn moved further into the heart of the operation. He wasn't just trying to stop the money. He was trying to expose the truth. Zayn's next stop was a small, nondescript building on the edge of the city. No one ever paid attention to it. It was just another forgotten office building. But Zayn knew it held the answers he needed. Deep inside, there was a server room, one that contained files no one was supposed to see. As he entered the building, Zayn noticed the security cameras. They were old, outdated, easy to bypass. He smiled to himself. He had been planning this for years. The door to the server room was locked, but Zayn had a key. He walked inside, his steps echoing through the empty hallways. The room was cold, the hum of machines filling the silence. The only light came from the blinking screens. Zayn sat down at one of the computers. He had access now. He had all the information he needed. He began typing rapidly, pulling up files, documents, and data logs. The files showed a history of manipulation, corruption, and greed. Powerful figures had been using the system to steal from millions, covering their tracks with every move. But Zayn had found the flaw. He had cracked the code, and now It was all laid out in front of him. The files included names of people who had been behind the biggest financial scandals in history. And at the top of the list was one name that sent a shock through Zane's chest. It was a name he had hoped he would never see again. His own. Zane sat back, staring at the screen. He wasn't just a whistleblower. He had been part of the system, the very system he was now trying to destroy. But the truth was bigger than him, and no matter what it took, he would see it through. Zane sat in the dark, his fingers trembling as they hovered over the keyboard. The screen in front of him blinked softly, illuminating his face. He could hear the sound of the air conditioning whirring, the only other noise in the quiet room. His mind raced. The name that appeared on the screen, his name, was the last thing he had expected. He leaned back in his chair, trying to calm his breathing. How had it come to this? The man he had once been, the man he had tried so hard to leave behind, was now the center of everything he had sworn to destroy. The files on the screen painted a picture of a young man, eager to prove himself, working for a government that had secrets too dark for the world to know. He had been part of their system, part of the machinery that kept everything running smoothly, until he couldn't take it anymore. It wasn't just about the money, it was about power. The power to control, to influence, to keep everyone in their place. Zane had once believed in the cause, but now, looking at the file, he saw how deep the corruption went. He had been used, and so had countless others. Zane's mind drifted back to that day, the day he had walked away from everything. He had been young, full of hope, and ready to change the world. But as time passed, the reality of what the government was really doing sank in. The people he had once worked with were the ones pulling the strings, keeping the public in the dark, all for their own gain. And the moment Zane had realized he could no longer be a part of it, he had made a choice. He had disappeared, but not completely. The files in front of him proved it. They had been tracking him all along. As Zane scrolled through the data, he saw something that made his blood run cold. There was a hidden file, one he hadn't seen before. It was buried deep within the system, locked behind layers of encryption. Whoever had created it didn't want anyone to find it. He clicked on it, and the screen flickered. It was a video file. Zane hesitated for a moment, then pressed play. The video showed a younger version of himself, sitting in a dark room, speaking into a camera. His face looked different, colder, more serious. "Everything you've been told is a lie," the younger Zane said. "They know everything about us, our thoughts, our actions, our plans. They've been controlling us for years, and they won't stop until they have complete control. The money, the power, it's all a distraction. The real goal is far worse." Zane's heart pounded in his chest. His younger self had known all of this. The truth had been hidden in plain sight, buried in the very system he had built. And now, that truth was coming to light. He closed the file quickly, his mind spinning. He had to act. The people behind all of this wouldn't stop until they had everything. And if Zane wasn't careful, they would find him. But he had no choice. He couldn't let them win. He couldn't let them control everything. Zane stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He had to move quickly. He couldn't stay in this building any longer. The people hunting him were getting closer. He could feel it. As he stepped out of the room and into the hallway, Zane's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw a message from an unknown number. "We know who you are. We're coming for you. Don't try to run." Zane's breath caught in his throat. They had found him. It was only a matter of time before they would be at the door. He couldn't let them catch him. Not now. Not after everything he had learned. He knew what he had to do next. Zane moved quickly through the building, past the quiet offices to down the long hallways, and out into the night. The city was dark, but he didn't care. He didn't have time to be afraid. Every step he took was another step away from the people who wanted him dead. He had to go underground, disappear again. But this time, it wouldn't be just to escape. It would be to stop them. His phone buzzed again. This time, the message was clearer. "We've got eyes on you. There's nowhere you can run." Zane felt a chill run down his spine. He was being hunted, and the people chasing him weren't just anyone. They were the ones who had been pulling the strings all along. Zane walked faster, his mind racing with options. There were few places he could go now. The network he had helped build was too large, too powerful. The people who wanted him dead had eyes everywhere. But Zayn knew something they didn't. He knew the system. He had helped create it. And now, he would use it against them. Zayn's feet pounded against the pavement as he ran through the darkened streets. The city was alive with lights, but to him, it all felt like a blur. His heart raced. His breath came in sharp gasps. The cold night air bit at his skin, but he barely noticed. All he could think about was staying one step ahead of the people chasing him. He had never been this close before. The truth was out, and now the people who controlled everything, the ones who had stolen billions, manipulated systems, and controlled the world from the shadows, were after him. And they would stop at nothing to make sure he didn't expose them. His phone buzzed again. He ignored it. Whoever it was, it didn't matter. He had bigger things to worry about. The chase had started the moment he had stepped out of that office building, and it wasn't just a group of agents anymore. No, this was something bigger, something far more dangerous. Zayn had been part of it once, and now he was its biggest threat. They knew he had all the answers. He had uncovered secrets they couldn't afford to let anyone see. He ducked down an alley, hoping to throw off his pursuers. He didn't have much time. The data he had uncovered in that hidden file was too important. If it got into the wrong hands, it could change everything. It was more than just a financial scandal. It was a web of lies, corruption, and control that had stretched across the globe for decades. And Zayn had uncovered it all. A car sped by on the street, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Zayn didn't stop to look. He just kept running. He had to keep moving, keep ahead of the game. He couldn't afford to let anyone catch up to him. He turned another corner and saw a narrow street ahead. It was a dead end. But Zayn wasn't worried. He had prepared for this moment. As he reached the end of the street, he stopped abruptly, his mind working quickly. He had already mapped out his escape plan. There was a hidden entrance behind a rundown building, a secret passage he had discovered months ago when he was still working for them. It was a risk, but it was his only chance. Zayn pushed open the rusted metal door, which creaked loudly in protest. He slipped inside and quickly shut it behind him, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He listened for a moment, the sound of his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. No footsteps. He was safe, at least for now. The room was dark, but Zayn didn't need light to know where he was. He had been here before. The narrow stairway in front of him led to an old underground tunnel, a place few people knew about. He had used it to hide before, but tonight, it was more important than ever. He descended the stairs quickly, his mind focused. His phone buzzed again, but this time he answered it. Zayn. A voice said on the other end. It was a voice he knew too well, one that sent a chill down his spine. Are you ready? The voice asked. Zayn clenched his jaw. What do you want? Don't play games with me, Zayn. The voice said, sharp and threatening. We know what you found. We know what you're trying to do. But you're not going to get away with it. We have eyes everywhere. You can't hide forever. Zayn didn't answer immediately. He kept moving through the dark tunnel, his footsteps echoing off the walls. He could hear the voice growing more impatient. We have your family, Zayn, the voice continued. If you don't stop this, they will pay the price. Zayn froze. His heart dropped into his stomach. His family? He hadn't heard from them in years, but he had always feared this day would come. The people behind the system knew how to make their enemies suffer, and they knew exactly where to hit. But Zayn wasn't going to let them use his family against him. Not like this. He gripped the phone tighter. You don't scare me, he said, his voice low and steady. You think you can threaten me, but I know everything. I've seen what you've done, and I'm not stopping until the world knows. The voice on the other end laughed, but it wasn't a comforting sound. It was cold, empty. You're making a big mistake, Zayn. You have no idea what you're up against. You have no idea who you're really dealing with. Zayn didn't care. He had come too far to turn back now. I've already made my decision, Zayn said, his voice firm, and you won't stop me. Without waiting for a response, he hung up the phone. He didn't need to hear any more threats. He knew what he had to do. And if the people behind this were going to hurt his family, They would have to come through him first. He reached the end of the tunnel, where a small, dimly lit room awaited him. Inside, a few old computers sat on desks, covered in dust. This was his last safe place. It was here, deep in the shadows, that Zane could finally make his move. He pulled out the encrypted files and began working quickly. He knew what had to be done. The world needed to know the truth. But Zane wasn't just a whistleblower. He was a man who had seen too much and was willing to risk everything to stop it. Zane's fingers flew over the keyboard, his mind focused on the task at hand. He had the data, the truth, everything that could expose the shadowy organization that had controlled the world for so long. His heart raced as he worked quickly, uploading the files to the secure server he had set up months ago. If he could get this information out, if he could make sure it reached the right people, the world would never be the same again. But as he worked, the sound of footsteps grew louder. Zane stopped, holding his breath. They were getting closer. He glanced at the door. The faint glow of a flashlight flickered beneath the cracks in the walls. His pursuers were on their way. He had to finish this, but he couldn't afford to be caught now, not when he was so close. The files were almost ready to be sent. He just needed a few more minutes. Minutes he didn't have. Zane's thoughts raced. Should he continue or should he run? If he ran now, the information would be lost. He had come too far to back down. He had to stay. He slammed his hand down on the keyboard, pushing the final files through the secure connection. His eyes scanned the screen, watching the data transfer, heart in his throat. The seconds felt like hours. The door creaked. Zane's body tensed. He quickly grabbed his phone, his thumb hovering over the button that would trigger the server's self-destruct mechanism if anything went wrong. The door swung open, and in the dim light, Zane saw two figures step inside, their faces hidden behind masks. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. "We knew you'd be here," one of them said, their voice calm, almost casual. "You can't hide forever, Zane." Zane stood tall, trying to mask his fear. His hand was still on the phone, ready to press the button. But he wasn't just going to run this time. He wasn't going to let them control his fate, not after everything he had learned. "I'm not running anymore," Zane said, his voice steady. "I've already won." The figure stepped forward, raising a hand. "You think it's over? You think you've done something big? You've only scratched the surface, Zane." The other figure stepped into the light, revealing a man with cold, calculating eyes. He was tall, his posture rigid. He wasn't just some hired muscle. This man was important, one of the leaders behind the curtain, pulling the strings. "You have no idea what you've just set in motion," the man said, his tone colder than the room. "This is bigger than you, bigger than anyone." Zane didn't flinch. "You've been lying to the world for too long. The people deserve to know the truth, and I'm going to make sure they do." The man laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think you can change the world by pushing a button? You think the truth will just set everyone free?" He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "You're nothing but a pawn in a game you don't understand." Zane's hand tightened around his phone. The files had uploaded. The world would soon know the truth. "You think this is the end?" The man continued. "This is just the beginning. You'll be erased, just like everyone else who tries to stand in our way." Zane didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The truth was already out there, and nothing they could do would change that. The wheels of change were already turning. Suddenly, Zane's phone buzzed. He looked down, his heart skipping a beat. The server had received the data. It had been sent. Before he could even react, the man reached for Zane's phone, swiping it out of his hand with lightning speed. Zane's heart sank. "It's too late, Zane," the man said, his voice dark. "This information is already ours. You can't stop us." But Zane smiled. "You think it's that easy. You think you can just delete it." He didn't look at the man. Instead, his focus was on the small device on the side of the desk, the last line of defense. It was a small emergency drive he had set up just in case. As the man turned to walk out of the room, Zane made his move. He lunged toward the desk, grabbing the emergency drive and slipping it into his pocket. In a few seconds, he had it connected to the backup system. The man stopped, his face hardening when he saw Zane's grin. "You're too late," Zane said, his voice filled with confidence. "I've already sent it to the right people. The world will see everything. Your lies, your corruption, it's over." The man lunged forward, but Zane was already moving. He hit a hidden switch on the wall, and the entire room went dark. The lights blinked out, and the hum of the computer system stopped. Zane took a deep breath, knowing it was time to leave. The man cursed, his footsteps echoing through the darkness, but Zane was gone. He was already on his way out. Outside, the cool night air hit him like a slap in the face. He had done it. The truth was out, and there was no going back now. The world would change, whether they were ready or not. Zane ran, his mind racing, but his heart steady. He had just made history. And the people who had tried to stop him, they would never see him coming.